Hi there, this is Heather, Shutterbug 101. Today we'll be going over the bridge camera, the Panasonic FZ1000 II, and all the buttons, doors, and menus. Let's get started. The Panasonic FZ1000 II is a 20 megapixel bridge camera with a 1-inch sensor. This camera has the ability to take raw photographs, has 5-axis stabilization, and can shoot videos up to 4K at 30 frames per second. It has a fully articulating touchscreen, a zoom range equivalent of a 25 to 400 millimeter lens, and has built-in Wi-Fi. One of my favorite features about this camera is it has a unique ability for 4K photos. This means it takes a 4K clip at 30 photographs per second and allows you to choose the best frame or frames. It also has a 12 frames per second regular continuous drive. In today's walkthrough, we will go over the buttons, doors, and different tools this camera offers and how to use them. Okay, so first thing, I want to apologize if my voice is a little off today. I'm just kind of getting over being sick and I'm starting to get back to normal, so I'm gonna jump right back into YouTube. So fortunately my voice is back for the most part, but still a little raspy, so do forgive me. So we'll go ahead and we'll get started with the front of the camera, as always. So on the top of the lens here, you can see that it does very clearly state that this lens does supply an equivalent range of a 25 to 400 millimeter lens on an interchangeable lens camera, which is nice. And on the front of the lens here, you can see that its variable aperture is going to be 2.8 to f4, which is pretty good. It gives a lot of light intake for a bridge camera. So it should give you a fantastic ability to be able to shoot in fairly low light, at least when it comes to point and shoot standards. This is going to be the larger sensor when it comes to a point and shoot camera. So as far as an all-in-one system, this is going to be one of the better ones to get. When it comes to the side of the lens here, we do have a couple of function buttons, which are all programmable in the menu. Currently, with the factory settings that the camera is currently on, the function 1 button is going to control the autofocus points, which we'll go over in a little bit when we go over our quick menu. The function 2 button is going to be your focusing button. So instead of having like a back button focusing, you can actually focus here and then take the picture. So it kind of allows you to lock focus with the function 2 button at the moment. Function 3 button, if you're zoomed out to a certain area and you want the camera to revert back to wide, you could just hold this button here, and then once you let it go, it zooms back out to where you had it zoomed out. That can be helpful in some circumstances, which is kind of nice. That's kind of everything on the front of the camera other than your control ring here. You can program this control ring to do whatever you'd like. Right out of the box, it zooms for you, but I find that this ring is really sensitive and sometimes I'll accidentally touch it and I don't want to do that. So at the moment, I just have it set for manual focusing, and I'll have my zoom control here, right where the shutter button is. Going to the sides of the camera here, we have a door here, which is going to give us remote control ability. We have an HDMI port to connect your television to a television, to connect your camera to a television set, so you can actually show like a slideshow of pictures from a trip or an event on a television that supports HDMI. And then you have a USB port here, which will allow you to transfer images to a computer, upgrade firmware, and also charge the battery, which is why it does say charge right in there. On the other side of the camera, we do have one door here, which is going to be your mic port. Now this camera with its in-body stabilization, 4K video, 1-inch sensor, ability to go to 2.8 at its widest points, is fantastic option if you're just looking for a basic video camera, especially with the zoom capability it has, and the fact that it takes excellent pictures as well. The ability that it has a mic port so you can get more direct sound or add a lavalier mic or whatever you want to do is a really nice feature for this camera. On the bottom of the camera, as you can see, we have a universal screw mount like we do all cameras to be able to put it on a tripod. Now when you do put this camera on a tripod, you do want to turn the stabilizer off in the menu, which we'll go over last in the video. If you do need to jump to certain time slots, look at the description below. I've made sure to put timestamps to get to wherever you need to be. To open this door here, you're just going to put this switch. There's going to be a rechargeable battery, which pops up just by hitting that little switch there. And then your memory card is going to go right here. Going to the top of the camera. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start with this far switch over here. So what this switch does here is it controls your drive mode. So the single square is going to allow you to take one single picture when you click and hold your shutter button down, versus the multiple frames here on the next section is going to allow you to do the 12 frames per second shooting. So when you click and hold the shutter button down, it's going to take 12 pictures at 12 frames per second. The 4K with multiple frames here is going to be your 4K burst mode. That's going to take the 30 frames per second video clips and separate it into pictures for you so you can pick and choose which photo that you would like. Your post focus mode is going to be the next one here. It has a little flower and a little mountain with multiple frames here and on the dial. So what this is going to be for is if you take a picture and it's still, it's a landscape or a close-up even, like a flower or something like this, because this camera does have a macro ability to it. You take the picture and it takes several photos and allows you to pick a focus point after the fact that it's taken the picture, which is kind of nice. This isn't to take pictures of anything that's moving, because it does take several photos. There's a chance that your subject's going to move, and then, you know, there's not really a way to pick a focus point at that point. We have time lapse and we also have timer. So depending on what you would like the drive mode to do, this dial is going to control all of that. We do have a pop-up flash on this camera that's controlled by this little switch right here. Just pops it right up. If we don't want it, we just push it down. We do also have a hot shoe on this camera. So this is to where you would mount your like shotgun mic after mounting it on the side of the camera, or you can use an external flash on this camera as well that is going to work with Panasonic mounts. Here we have our on and off switch. Okay, so you just switch it to off and on. And then we have our mode dial. Okay, so this is kind of going to control like the function of the photos, what controls that we have control over here. So IA is going to be intelligent auto. Intelligent auto is going to essentially be automatic, but it's going to be really smart automatic. Now in automatic, you're letting the camera take full control over every aspect of settings that it's changing. In IA, if you have it pointed at a person, it'll kick into portrait mode. If you have it pointed at a distinct scenery, it's going to kick into landscape mode. If you're really close to a subject, it's going to kick into macro mode. So it's really smart in being able to tell exactly where you're pointed at. Now, just because it's intelligent doesn't mean that it can't be wrong. Sometimes you want a certain look, or you want it to focus on a certain subject, or you want the lighting to come out a certain way, And while the camera does a fairly good job on its own, you know, sometimes it doesn't come out the way you want it to. At that point, you switch it into your manual modes. Okay, so your manual modes consist of your P, A, S, and M. Your P mode is going to be your first step out of auto. It's going to stand for program. Your program mode is going to allow it to be auto, but also give you control over certain aspects, like changing your shutter speed or aperture, changing where you want to focus, how it's going to focus, where you want the light to be taken from. You're telling the camera exactly like what you want to change, and then it will change everything else accordingly, so you still get a well-exposed image. So it's a great mode to start practicing on when learning about what makes a photograph. Your A mode is going to be your aperture mode. Your aperture mode is going to control the opening in the lens. I was talking about at the beginning, your available aperture on this camera is 2.8 to f4. So you can actually choose to open it all the way up or close it all the way up, depending on if you're shooting in low light, if you want that nice blurry background, sharp foreground for portraits, or a nice focus when you're doing macro. You know, it will give you those type of effects there. S mode is going to be your shutter speed priority. This is going to control how fast you're taking the image. This is going to control, this is going to be able to capture movement or show movement, depending on what you want to do. This will also allow you to do long exposures, like in my examples of the Golden Gate Bridge. Those were long exposures on a tripod. To be able to get those pictures at night, you have to do longer exposures. And when you're shooting in shutter speed, it's actually expressed in fractions of seconds. And then when you start to see a number with the little 2 tick marks like inches, it's actually going to be full seconds long. So depending on what you want to do, whether you're taking a picture of a hummingbird, so you want to take it at 1/2000th of a second, versus if you're taking a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge at night, which could be anywhere from 10 seconds to 30 seconds long. It's all up to you to choose that on your shutter speed mode, while your camera chooses your aperture. M, of course, is going to be full manual. I don't expect people to be going full manual on this camera, but if you wanted the ability to tinker with pictures that you've taken in your P, A, or S mode and kind of push it here and there when it comes to aperture, ISO, and shutter speed, you're welcome to do so. But don't jump right into manual when you get this camera, especially if you've never taken pictures off of auto. It can be a little overwhelming because you have full control. The camera's only doing what you tell it to. So it's really important to know the ins and outs of your camera before you jump into a manual setting. You have your movie mode here. Now, your movie mode is going to allow you to change certain things in the menu that are not available on your other modes. It allows you to see your mic levels when you do have a mic plugged in. That sort of thing. Otherwise, you can record a video on any mode here. It doesn't have to be the movie mode. All you have to do is press your red button here once to start recording, press it again to stop recording. It's very, very simple. We have your C mode, which is your custom mode. This is going to be for situations where your lighting never changes, or you want your settings to be the same, so you can program this for either video or photos, depending on what your main focus is with this camera. For photos, you would really only use this in a case where you're shooting in a studio lighting, like I do for my YouTube, where my lighting never changes, and then you were to go outside, take pictures where the lighting is definitely different, and then you were to come back and you want to take more pictures under your studio lighting. All you have to do is switch back to your custom mode that you've saved it under, and you don't have to start all over again, which is kind of nice. The little squishy rectangle here is going to be your panoramic mode to get your wide establishing shots working from left to right. in a nice steady movement. Do not go up and down with your camera because then it will not work. We have your scene mode, which is going to be okay. We have your scene mode, which is going to be automatic, but it's essentially going to be automatic presets. So you're telling the camera, okay, you have full control over whatever you do with these pictures, but just know I want silky skin, or I'm taking distinct scenery, or I want that romantic sunset glow, or vivid sunset glow, or warm glowing nightscapes, or, you know, handheld night shot, image of a flower, appetizing food, black and white even. So you're just telling the camera, you have full control, but just know this is the look that I want. Now don't let scene mode completely control your photography. If you're taking a picture of a person and then all of a sudden you want to take a picture of a flying bird, don't go into your scene mode and go, oh, I have to find that still animal setting, because then you'll miss the shot. When it comes down to it, just switch over to IA and take your picture if that's what it comes down to. Your scene modes are mainly to kind of play with and see if you can see a difference, if you like certain modes more than others. It's just meant to kind of stir your creative process with this camera, just help you step outside the box. And then lastly here, before we get back to the IA mode, is going to be our little painter's palette. This is going to be like our little creative mode here. So it'll allow you different filters. So you can do expressive, retro, there's different black and whites, there's sepia. But my favorite one here that I was actually just on is the 1-point color, which will actually allow you to pick out one color specifically in the photo and have everything else black and white, which is kind of a cool little one to play with. Now all of those are accessible when doing Photoshop, so you can do that all yourself after the fact. But if you're not planning on getting into Photoshop, if you just want to have fun with your camera, take pictures, transfer it to your phone and post it the way it is, you know, have fun with these, you know, try them out, see what you like, see what you don't like, or completely ignore them. You know, just know that they're there in case you do want to play with them. For the rest of the video, I'm going to stay in the program mode because when you are in the IA mode, a lot of stuff becomes unavailable to change. So at least in the P mode, it'll give you the wider spectrum of what is available. We do have an adjustment knob here, so this would change like the aperture in A mode or the shutter speed in S mode. So it really just depends on kind of what mode you have it on and what it's going to change there. The function 5 button, that's going to change your white balance and ISO. So depending if you want to change your ISO is going to be this dial here. If you want to change your white balance, so it's the white balance is going to be with this adjustment knob here, which you want to keep in AWB for the most part, which is auto white balance, and then ISO is with this guy here. Function 4 is going to control your exposure. So if we click on function 4, it's actually going to change brightness and darkness. So if you go negative number, it's going to make it darker. If you go positive number, it's going to make it brighter. That way you can brighten up or darken. You can brighten up or darken your image without changing any major settings. We've already gone over our video button here. There's our adjustment, and we've gone over our zoom lever and shutter button here. At this point, we're going to go ahead and start going over the back of the camera. Okay, so the back of the camera here, we have a function 8 button. There's a lot of function buttons on this camera, and like I said at the beginning, all function buttons are actually customizable, so you can change them to be whatever you would like, but just so you know what they are out of the box. This one is going to be live viewfinder. That's what LVF stands for, because what this viewfinder does is it has a little sensor up here. So if you cover that sensor, it's actually going to detect that your face is close enough to turn your viewfinder on, versus if you take your face away, it's going to turn your screen back on. If you hit this button again, it's going to go right to the viewfinder. Hit it again, it's going to go just to the screen, so the sensor won't work. And then if you hit it one more time, it's going to be back to auto. This setting over here, okay, this is going to control your autofocus mode. So this is going to control how your camera is autofocusing. So AFS is going to be autofocus single. Autofocus single is going to be for subjects that are still. So AFS is going to stand for autofocus single, where your subject is not moving, like a landscape, a still life, somebody that's posing, because it's going to focus and it's going to lock on and it's not going to move. AFC is going to be autofocus continuous. This is where the camera is going to continually autofocus as the subject stays on the screen. It's anticipating movement. That way, you know, it's going to try and stay focused on the moving subject as it moves. And then AFF is actually going to be autofocus flexible. So you're letting the camera kind of determine if the subject is still or moving, and let it kind of decide accordingly. Otherwise, you have MF for manual focus, which you would manually adjust with that front ring here in front. Autofocus auto exposure lock, so you can lock in autofocus or lock in auto exposure, which is just anticipated right there. So if you hold it down, it's going to lock in auto exposure, and then you can recompose. So if you wanted to take specific lighting from a specific area and use it at a different area or a different angle, that's how you would do it. You would focus and auto exposure lock, and then you would recompose your shot. So just kind of depends on your situation. If you want something backlit, or you want to take the lighting specifically from their face or your subject and use that accordingly. Here we have our quick menu as our function 6 button. Now this is a very important menu. What this does is allows you to change everything on top and everything on the bottom here without having to go into your actual menu. So what is available here is the first one here is going to be how it defines color. So I would just keep it in standard for the most part, but you have vivid, you have monochrome, you have natural, you have scenery, those type of things. But overall, I would keep it in standard. You have your flash settings, which it's at the moment force flash on. So if you have your flash popped up, it's going to fire no matter what. You also have red eye available or no flash. You have your video mode, so if you want to use HD or 4K, depending on what you want. We have ratio size, so the the measurements of the photo itself. You have RAW, JPEG, or RAW and JPEG. I'm shooting in RAW because I want to make the most out of my pictures on this camera, but you do need a Photoshop program in order to edit those, so that is something to keep in mind. You have, again, so how we kind of went up here, went over AFS versus AFF. Notice they are on the same dot. You would have to go into your quick menu and determine if you want to be on AFS or AFF in your quick menu there. Now, if we turn it on AFC, okay, and we went to our quick menu, naturally, it won't allow us to choose anything different because on this switch, that's the only option. So just know that that's kind of what this means when you have both. It's not necessarily a combination. You still have to choose just in your quick menu itself. You have your autofocus points. So depending if you want to use the entire 49 point focus area, if you want to use a just general group, if you want to use one area, which is going to be a more specific spot, or pinpoint, which is kind of one of those 49 points. Otherwise, you also have tracking, which you can use in conjunction with the AFC here, and it will help track movement through the frame. Or you have face and eye detection if you take pictures of a lot of people. So it will automatically detect faces and eyes and direct its focus. The next one here is going to be our metering. so where it's taking the light from. So I personally like to have it for center weighted to take whatever's in the center. So if it meters for something dark like the camera, everything else will get much lighter, versus if it does something very light like my hand, it's actually going to get much darker. So it really kind of depends on what your main focus is, because a lot of my stuff is going to be in the center and I want to take the light and I want that to be the direct focus. A lot of my stuff is centered. You could have it on multimetering, which considers the entire image and kind of finds a good balance for everything. You could do spot metering, which would allow you to meter for something in the middle and then kind of off-put it to the side in case you wanted to do something more asymmetrical, something a little bit more creative that way when it comes to photography. And then we're back to our exposure here, which of course you can still change with the function 4 button we went over earlier to make your scene a little bit lighter or darker. Your ISO, which is going to be your image sensitivity to light, which can also be changed by pushing the up button here, which we'll go over here in a moment. But I recommend just kind of keeping this guy on ISO and then setting a sensitivity limit to it in your menu when getting started. That way it can kind of help you, it'll help assist you in learning all of these things rather than having just another thing that you have to learn right away. And then we have our white balance again, which of course is also changeable with the function 5 button alongside the ISO, which is your temperature control, your warmer and cooler options here. But overall, auto white balance does a great job in everyday situations to automatically determine what the temperature should be. We have our playback button here, so if we hit this button, it'll actually play back pictures that we've taken. Naturally, I don't have a memory card in this right now, so it's not going to show any pictures, but to scroll through pictures, you would just use your directional pad here to go forward or backward through photos. Your universal escape button, you should know, if you're stuck in a menu or something like that, is just to hit your shutter button halfway down to get right back into the shooting menu. We have the display button, which is going to change different looks and tools on the back of the screen here. So this is actually going to be a level. You know, you can change it just to give you information where you have to look through the viewfinder, completely dark. Otherwise, this is probably going to be one of the more simple ones where it gives you your battery level. Down here will display how many pictures you have left, and just general settings that you have. Of course, this is touchscreen, so in case you wanted to change where you wanted your focus to be, you would just kind of touch the screen there. Again, to change ISO, you can push up here if you would like to do that. I'm going to turn it on auto currently. White balance, you just push to the right if you wanted to change white balance outside the quick menu or your function 5 button. If you push to the left, this is going to be your autofocus points if you want to change that quickly without having to go to the quick menu. By pushing down, this is how you can get to your macro mode. So if you want to do macro focus, that's how you would do that. So your function 7 button is going to be your back button, and also your trash can for throwing pictures away that you've already taken. At this point, we're going to go ahead and get into the actual menu here. So a lot of the stuff found in your actual menu is found on the outside of your camera or in your quick menu. So a lot of these I may just skim over. Some of these I might skim over just because it's not important to know unless you're shooting for a very specific reason and it's very technical. So if you do have any questions that I don't go over in detail on the menu, let me know in the comments below. I'd be happy to go further into it for you and help kind of go over that with you. Aspect ratio we already went over. The quality of picture we went over in the quick menu. All of these are in the quick menu itself. Metering mode we went over. Eye dynamic, eye resolution. I would personally keep these off if you're thinking about doing any editing. Otherwise, you know, play with them. It can make a difference in your lighting. and it can make a difference. It can make a difference in your photos when it comes to shadows and highlights and things like that. We have your flash settings, red eye removal if you want to have that on. ISO, auto upper limit, keep that on auto. You have, let's see, your diffraction compensation. It's up to you if you want to keep that on. That essentially, you can keep that on auto if you would like. You have your stabilizer. Again, you want to turn your stabilizer off if you're going to be on a tripod, which, this was, so we had it on a tripod. You always want to have your digital zoom off. Right now it's grayed out because of the certain settings that I'm on, which is fine. But always keep your digital zoom off. It actually destroys the quality of your images because it's cropping in and you're losing detail. Your burst rate, your 4K photo, your timer, all of these set to this timer here. Your silent mode. So this camera can completely go silent, but key to keep in mind is that a lot of features will be turned off when you're in silent mode. You won't be able to use a burst mode. You won't be able to use flash, anything like that. It's a very covert mode. So do keep that in mind if you do turn that on and some features turn off. Your shutter type, manual shutter works just fine, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Although electric shutter will allow some things to turn on. You have bracketing available. You have HDR available. You have multiple exposures, all in your shooting menu. The movie menu is going to be extremely similar in the fact that it has a lot of similar menu items to it when it comes to its tab. So I'm not going to really go over this one other than, the only difference is it does have like mic levels and wind noise canceller and whatnot for the audio of the video itself. Here we have our custom menu. So if we just start up at the top and click OK and just scroll down, it kind of goes through all of those. So you have like different exposure options, your autofocus, auto exposure lock. So if you want to customize all of these, you have like half press release. I would keep that off. Essentially means that when you half push your shutter button, it takes a picture. Quick autofocus, you have eye sensor autofocus. A lot of these like focus release priorities, focus switching for vertical, horizontal. It's very technical. Unless like you're specifically seeking something out, like, oh, I wonder if I can do this. I wouldn't worry about digging into these too much. You have your function button set, so if you want to change any of these function buttons, ISO displayed setting, your quick menu, your dial sets, your control ring, all of these are just kind of your customizable options, your zoom lever, auto review, how long you want the picture to pop up when it's on here. Monochrome live view, which just allows you to view your picture in black and white because you can kind of see more values there rather than color, but it captures it in color. If you want certain like graphs up, like the histogram or the zebra pattern, you have your manual focus guide, your record area, your remain display if you want to display how many pictures you have left versus how much time of recording you have left. Lens retraction, if you want that to automatically retract after so much time, you could do that. Face recognition. So these are all just very customizable, make your camera your own sort of tab here. Then this is going to be just your settings here. So it's going to control general settings like your time, your date, your travel date in case you wanted, you were traveling to a different time zone, your Wi-Fi to connect the camera to your smart device to be able to transfer pictures, to use your phone as a remote if you wanted to do that. You can turn the beep on and off, economy mode to save battery life, monitor display, monitor luminance, eye sensor, the USB mode, the language, your version display for your firmware, if you need to reset your settings. So say if you're going through this, you're changing different settings to see what they do, and you're like, shoot, I don't know what I did. A safe way to always go about it is just go to reset, and it resets all your settings back to factory. You know, that way if you do get stuck, you know, it's just best to reset it. Yeah, demo mode, don't even worry about that. And then format, which I always like to go over in all of my videos. So when you go on a trip and you go and take pictures and you come back and you have a birthday party to go to, and okay, I downloaded all my pictures from my card onto my computer. You've made sure they're safe. I cannot stress that enough. You've made sure your pictures are safe. And you want to start over with the card, so you go take pictures at this birthday party, right? So instead of going to the little trash can down here and just deleting all of the pictures, what you want to do is go into the menu and you want to go to Format. Now what formatting does is it completely and permanently deletes all data on the card and resets it back to how you purchased it. Now, when you use the trash can, it deletes the visible data, but keeps the data of the photo kind of in the back of its mind. That way, if you do need to restore it with a special program, you technically can. It just makes it available for you to overwrite it with new files. Now, overwriting those files over and over and over again through time can cause issues. You can get corruption issues, which is going to be somewhat like a virus, where it tends to eat away files one by one. And sometimes it can lock you out of your card completely. So it's just best that every now and then, you know, don't get obsessive about it. Like, oh my gosh, I didn't format my card before I did this. No big deal. Every few months or so, go through and just format your card. You make sure your pictures are safe. They're backed up onto an external hard drive or an online source or wherever it is. And you just format your card to restart it. You know, make sure it starts fresh. You're good to go. And you know, you have a less chance of having corrupted images in the future. You have a My Menu setting, which is going to allow you to take anything from these tabs here and save it into this specific menu. So instead of having to dig through these menus in case you find something that's not laid out on the outside of your camera and you want to be able to easily access it, you can just tie it into one tab. And then you have the playback menu, which is going to allow you to do a slideshow, protect pictures, rate your pictures, allows you to do some clear retouching or put a text stamp on it or resize it or crop it or anything like that to pictures you've already taken. I wouldn't do so much of that. If you're going to do any cropping or editing to the picture, I would do it either on your computer or even on your phone is fine. You know, just because on this screen, it's so small that sometimes you just can't tell. And sometimes you're better off on even using your phone. So other than that, that pretty much sums up everything on this camera here. If you guys have any questions on this camera that I did not answer, please let me know in the comments below. If you have another camera that you would like me to go over, whether it's Panasonic, Canon, Olympus, Sony, Nikon, just let me know. I'd be happy to add it to my to-do list. If you have other tips and tricks videos you'd like me to do, I'd love to do those as well. Until next time, keep your eye out for inspiration, Shutterbugs. Bye.